10 seconds, you can begin.
Good morning. I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Ending Homelessness Post-COVID-19, What Social Housing Policies and Partnership. My name is Alice Pittini. I am the Research Director at Housing Europe, which is the European Federation of Public, Cooperative and Social Housing Providers. I'll be moderating today's event, which is organized in the framework of the Housing Solution Platform. For those of you who don't know the Housing Solution Platform yet, this is a practice-driven initiative that is aimed at identifying and debating potentially innovative solutions for affordable housing, particularly targeting those who are locked out of the housing market. And it's a joint initiative of Housing Europe, FEANSA, and Fondation Abbé Pierre. So just some practical details before we actually kick off the webinar. We will have a question and answers session, but in the meantime, you are already very welcome to use the Q&A box to post any question you might have. And please remember to include who you are and the speaker that the question is directed to, where this is relevant. You can also use the chat box to post comments, links, information that you want to share with the audience and the speakers. We will be taking the questions throughout the webinar, as I said, but we will have a dedicated session at the end of the first part of this meeting. So back to today's theme. What we see is that the pandemic has clearly demonstrated the importance of securing adequate and affordable housing for all. We also saw that not having a home or living in overcrowded housing has put people who are living in inadequate housing solutions and people who are homeless at a particularly high risk for their health. We also see that homelessness is on the rise. Probably for those of you who have joined the meeting today, this is not new information, but FEANSA continuously reports increases in the number of homeless people, changing face of homelessness with more young people, more families falling into homelessness. And they estimate that on average, each night in Europe, 700,000 people are sleeping rough. So what we want to discuss today is how to act together to tackle this important and urgent issue. We believe that ending homelessness requires strong action and strong cooperation between all the actors involved. Social housing, of course, can play an important role in both tackling and preventing homelessness. We will hear a lot about the concrete experiences on the ground today from the panelists this morning. But first, we will look at Europe. And therefore, I'm very pleased and honored to introduce Ms. Cindy Franzen. As a former member of the Flemish Parliament, she was elected as a member of the European Parliament in May 2019 for the EPP group. Among other important roles, she's co-chair of the intergroup on fighting against poverty in Europe, and she's also a member of the Committee on Employment and Social Affairs. And Cindy has been extremely active within the European Parliament in promoting the commitment towards ending homelessness. So without further ado, I give her the floor to open our webinar today. Thank you, Cindy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much also for organizing this important event and for inviting me to speak. I hope you can hear me Yes, okay. This is a real honor for me as indeed co-chair of the intergroup Fighting Against Poverty, where we work together with lots of political groups, and the S&D, the Greens, Renew, the left, where we work together on the fight against poverty in the European Parliament, and as a member in the Employment and Social Affairs Committee in the European Parliament, we do discuss also tackling homelessness. The timing of this webinar couldn't be better, on the eve of the Ministerial conference, where the EU platform on combating homelessness will be launched. It's a very important day, and before the COVID-19 crisis, already at least 700,000 people experienced homelessness on any given day in Europe, and many more live in overcrowded or unsatisfactory accommodation that they cannot afford or that does not meet their needs. And there are 70% more people living on the streets than 10 years ago. Those numbers are huge, and we should do something about it. The number of homeless people has grown during the crisis and is likely to further increase. Many families have gone through a very difficult period with many uncertainties and financial difficulties because of lockdown measures. And the COVID-19 crisis has shown that homelessness is a public health issue and that shelters are often inadequate and unsafe places to live in. Homeless people need housing just like any other member of society, and now it is the time to promote housing-led first approaches to homelessness and avoid going back to the old normal. And within our work in the European Parliament, we have put the fight against homelessness and the role of the social housing sector high on the agenda, and we will continue to do so. First of all, I give you a short overview in the call for action that we launched with the intergroup Fighting Against Poverty in June 2020, yes, last year. We called up an EU framework for national homelessness strategies, coordinated and facilitated by the Commission. And this framework should include data collection, the monitoring of policy progress, and the promotion of best practices, whilst addressing Principle 19 of the Pillar of Social Rights. This is very important. Secondly, the European Parliament has in the past months, at different occasions, adopted reports and resolutions with a clear focus and demands with regard to homelessness. And I want to thank also Freek Spinneween, who always made us be clear and pay attention to these issues. And I'll mention two resolutions. The first one is the EP resolution of November on tackling homelessness rates in the EU, with a call upon the Commission to propose a EU framework for national homelessness strategies. Also call for a stronger action from the Commission and the member states to end poverty by 2030. In this resolution, the Parliament also expressed a clear call upon the member states to adopt the principle of housing first, which really helps to reduce homelessness in an important way by introducing action plans and innovative approaches based on the concept of a home being a fundamental human right. And the second the second resolution in the Parliament was from January this year on decent and affordable housing for all. Kim van Sparentak had the lead in this, in which the European Parliament called on the EU to recognize access to decent and affordable housing as an enforceable human right and to push for measures to eradicate homelessness by 2030, and also underlined the role of the social housing sector. And I am convinced that the social housing sector will play an important role in preventing and tackling homelessness. Social housing providers deliver a wide range of services together with service providers and local authorities, such as offering supported housing solutions for people with multiple and complex needs, the relation with welfare and healthcare providers, taking part in Housing First programs and so on. And in several member states, also in my own country, in Belgium, Housing First projects are already up and running, and it works really well. By giving people a home, they get the chance to solve also health, psychological, financial problems, get access to the labor market or to education, which can really give them a chance to put their lives back on track. A third thing, with the European Child Guarantee that was launched by the European Commission in March this year, we can put important steps forward to guarantee a set of universal rights for children and support their families. Free and effective access to childhood education and care, school-based activities, as at least one healthy meal each school day, healthcare, and effective access to adequate housing. A fourth thing in the running is the Porto Social Summit. We have gathered our forces as members of the European Parliament together with Housing Europe, FIANSA, Fondation Abbé Pierre, and many other organizations, mayors, European cities, members of the Committee of the Regions, to put the fight against homelessness high on the agenda of the summit, the social summit. And there we called again for a commitment to end homelessness by 2030, the incorporation of the fight against homelessness in the architecture of the economic and social policy coordination of the EU, and a follow-up through the social scoreboard of the semester process. The collaboration of the EU within the national, regional, local level as the European Union will not solve homelessness alone, and much of the work needs to be done also at national, regional and local level. A European commitment can strengthen the work done by all actors, and although the Porto Social Commitment Declaration were maybe not as concrete as we would want it, there is a clear commitment to reduce inequalities, defend fair wages, fight social exclusion, and tackling poverty. Take on the objective of fighting child poverty and to tackle homelessness. And last but not least, next week, there will be the high-level conference specifically dedicated to homelessness, which the launch of the European platform on combating homelessness as part of the action plan of the European Pillar of Social Rights. I am very hopeful that the EU platform as part of the action plan on the European Pillar of Social Rights can and will be an important turning point in the fight against homelessness. It will be a very important thing. And to make the platform a success, we need to listen to organizations that represent and work with homelessness people to see what should be done first, what the most urgent needs are, and how we can collaborate at medium and long term. The platform will also be an important tool to have reliable data on homelessness, which will make it possible to better monitor progress that is made. And with the EU platform, we will all together, EU policymakers, national, regional and local policymakers, the social housing sector and organizations representing and working with homeless people have a better instrument to make progress towards the eradication of homelessness by 2030. And cooperation among all actors involved is absolutely necessary, and the social housing sector should be clearly identified as a key partner. And on the long term, a better and more holistic approach to housing policy at all levels will help to address homelessness. I'm looking forward to listen to the experts on how public housing, social housing already plays an important role today. But of course, I'm also looking forward to hear from you how we can strengthen the role of social housing to address homelessness from an EU perspective. What can we do as politicians, as members of the parliament, as the European Commission, also within the Council. So I hope we will have a good and broad discussion. And thank you very much for your attention and for being here with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Franzen, for this very passionate, I would say, call for action. I think what we can get from your speech, there is really a political momentum that encourages cooperation and working together to this common goal, that is ending homelessness. I think it's also very important to keep in mind that it will need a lot of work and indeed a lot of coordination between the different levels of administration, between the different actors, to make sure that in this current political support will actually bring tangible results for people in or on the edge of homelessness on the ground. So thank you very much again for this introduction. As we are a bit short of time this morning, we turn now directly to France, as our next speaker is Sarah Coupechou. She is research manager for Europe at the Fondation Abbé Pierre, a not-for-profit organization that aims at enabling all disadvantaged people to access decent housing and a dignified life. Sarah is, by the way, also the co-coordinator of a very important report, the annual overview of housing exclusion in Europe, that has become a real point of reference for all of those that are interested in learning more about trends in homelessness and housing exclusion across the Union. So, Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alice, and thank you, Housing Europe and FIANSA for the invitation today to speak. I will speak from my French point of view today, even if I'm a European manager in Fondation Abbé Pierre, and as you say, Alice, we are producing the overview on housing exclusion in Europe each year. But today I will speak about the situation in France and the evolution of the policies on housing first since 10 years now in France. So just to begin, for those who doesn't know the Fondation Abbé Pierre, we are a well-known French foundation, and we are working for years now on the fight for the housing rights, the right for people in vulnerability to access to adequate housing. So we are granting some projects on the floor, on the ground, to access to the right, to produce some social housing, to support some people in needs with organization. And we are producing an annual report, national report, and this is the opportunity each year to give some recommendation to the governments, French government, to improve their policy. So just to give you little context in France, in 2019, Fondation Abbé Pierre has evaluated the number of homeless people in France at 300,000 people. And in this number, you have 40,000 homeless people living in the streets. And this is a big increase. This is just an evaluation because we didn't have a survey since 2012 in France. So Fondation Abbé Pierre think that it was important to do an evaluation to show that since this time, sorry, I have to close my mail. Since this time, the increase were really important because since 2012, it is the double. We had 143,000 people at that time, and now we estimate it at 300,000 people. So this is a lot of people, and we think that on average, 2 people die in the street on the street in France every day, and in 2019 it was 600 60 people. So we have a big issue on the question of data in France, and we hope to have a new survey just in 2025. So it's not now, and we push the government to have another survey to know more about people in emergency accommodation and so on. And the result of this increase is the increasing budget for emergency accommodation, which has almost quadrupled in 10 years. And today we can say that we have 500,000 places at the end of 2019 in emergency accommodation. I have to remind you that in France we have also, and this is maybe the first political will to change the way that we give answer to this phenomenon of homelessness in France. Since 2007, we have the affordable housing right in France. That means that when someone doesn't have a place to live, when they don't have adequate housing, they can sue the state front of the courts, and the state have the obligation, a resort obligation, to give a house to people. So as you see, we have dichotomy in France that we have big tool, a legislative tool, to answer to promote the right to housing for people, but in the same time we have a big increase of homeless people in the state. So since 2010, the government begins to have the will to change the policy and the model of the system for homeless people. So the first step was the creation of the program Un chez soi d'abord, which was the first partnership between housing, the sector of housing, and the health services. So there was a big experimentation of the housing first model, and it begins in 4 cities, big cities, Paris, Lille, Marseille, and Toulouse. And the idea, it was to make a bridge between the difficulties of housing of homeless people, which was with mental health in the street, and the sector of psychiatric hospitals, and to promote this model of housing first. So it was a big experience, and we had a collaboration between those 2 ministries, and also with a big evaluation of the experiment by the university teams. And it was, I think that it is maybe the biggest experience in Europe on housing first program, with a cohort in the program and another cohort in the classical model, and the purpose was to compare and to see what was the result at the end. So in 2018, it was the overview was the output was really interesting, and we saw, as in all the experience all over Europe about housing first, that almost 90% of people were still at home, and there was a large economy on health cost, justice cost, and so on. So it was a positive experience, but at the end, it was just like 300 people rehoused, and they promote a new program since from 2018 to 2022, and now there is 16 additional sites when town cities where the program is present. So now we think that it's almost more or less 20,000 people rehoused in this program. Though it's still like a program and a dispositif, and it's not really a public policy. We know that there is in this program the proof that it works, the proof that we have to work all together, this ministry, housing, health services, hospital, university, and also social support, and also the social housing, the private housing also, because they use also the private housing. But at the end, it was not a policy. It was not a really systemic change, and we just have the proof that it works. So after this program, at the beginning of the mandate of the President Macron in September 2017, there was a launch of a 5-year Housing First plan for 2018 to 2022, and the idea was to have a general change in the way that we will give an answer to homeless people. So the idea was to produce a lot of very housing units per year, some what we call pension famille. It's really little units, collective units, and in that unit you have little flats, but also some collective place where people can have collective activities, and they are not alone in their flats. So there was a goal to 10,000 places in that kind of house, and 40,000 additional places in private sector. But after 4 years now, what we see is that the purpose is not achieved, and there is still necessity to produce more social housing, because this is the question where there is the purpose is not achieved. And finally, the state did a call for interests to different territories, and we saw now 23 local authorities that expressed their volunteer to change the model. And because it's not enough for the moment, we have this year's a new policy, which is the new service, national service, which is called From the Street to Housing. And again, is the idea to change the model in a systemic way. And we see that at the beginning it was an experience, then we tried to use it in certain territories, volunteer territories, and now the government would like to generalize the idea of housing first, and to change in a deeply reform the adaptive system, and to for the moment, the system is just the answer to the stairs system, and now we have to change it in a deeply way. So this is managed by the DIAL. The DIAL is the inter-coordination of different ministry. And what we think in Fondation Abbé Pierre, that even if the will is there, and we think that the way is a good way, we need more resources and more political will to do the change in practice. And now what we see is that even if a lot of people are rehoused in France, in this system, it's not enough, because we still have a number of homelessness which is increasing. So what I can say, it's the idea of and I think that everybody will say that today we have to work all together, organization of civil society, local government, national government, and social housing and private housing also. We need some financial resources. And at the end, the recommendation of the Fondation Abbé Pierre in France for the government is to produce more very social housing. And that means that government has to give some subsidies for social landlords, because if we want some low rents for people with very low resources, it's important to have really low rents. It's important to work with social housing for to promote the allocation of in priority for homeless people, because in France we still have difficulties to do access for homeless people to social housing in a certain way, because we need some support, we need very low rents, as I said. And I think it is a partnership that we will have to promote at the local level. And we need to also increase the number of how to say that, partnership with this private sector, and not only with location to organization, but also with direct contract between the landlord and the tenants. And at the end, I want to say that in France, what we see we need some financial and human resources to bring the transformation of the system in a systemic way. And maybe today we can ask EU in the framework of the platform to give sufficient practices and funds to do this change. And maybe we could use the cohesion fund for that.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Sorry, I was going to ask you to wrap it up, but I see that you managed perfectly.
Sorry.
We're actually going to have more time to discuss about the potential role of the European Union towards the end of our webinar today. So hold your thoughts, because we will get back to that point. Thanks a lot for the very interesting presentation that you gave. I found it quite very informative, and also some points were quite striking. And I think, to me, maybe the most significant point that you raised is the need to go from let's say, a pilot approach to systemic changes. And I think this is also very much in line with what we call for here within Housing Europe, and also with our partner organizations. And among the changes you mentioned, there's of course need for more social housing, better coordination between the different actors, and also the necessary funding that goes with it. So we'll be happy to hear more about this later, and how the EU can help. But I think now it's time to go to the next speaker. So I would like to introduce Maria Montes Miguel. Maria is the director of Vipasa, that is the public housing company of the Asturias Autonomous Community in Spain. She's also a member of the board of Housing Europe and the vice president of the Spanish Federation of Public Housing, AVS, which brings together more than 100 local housing companies throughout Spain, managing about 250,000 homes. So please, Maria, tell us about your experience in tackling homelessness in partnership with municipalities. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you for the invitation to share some of our experiences in Spain with you, with so important organizations such as Housing Europe, and Fondation Abbé Pierre, and FEANSA, and so on. Well, I would like to first of all, I would like to explain some specific features about social housing sector in Spain, which is that social housing sector in Spain mostly is public. So most of the organizations integrated in our association and most of the organizations from the social housing sector are public entities, local or regional public entities. So I think that this is a big difference between the social housing sector in Europe. And there are different models of collaboration between social housing sector with municipalities and with NGOs in order to combat homelessness, the homelessness situation. Sometimes social housing organizations sign agreements with NGOs and put dwellings for the housing first programs or social purposes. And sometimes the agreements are signed between housing services or social housing services inside the municipality and social services, and social housing services put dwellings available for social purposes. But what I want to tell you today is one model of collaboration that one region developed in Spain, and we think that it really works. And to know this collaboration, first of all, what I'm going to do is invite you to see a very short video about the story of Aurelio and Pedro. Aurelio and Pedro were two homeless people who lived beside the train station in a small village. And let's see their story. Can you put the video?
Nusha, we don't see the video.
No sé.
We
You
see
don't see the video?
PowerPoint. No, we see the ABS PowerPoint, but not the video.
Oh,
Like maybe to
let
close.
me share again.
Yeah.
You see it now?
Yes.
Yo en la calle no sé exactamente porque no memorizo fechas. Por lo tanto, yo calculo que son unos 13 años o 13 años largos.
Sí, yo estaba allí en la estación de Febe y estando yo allí pues a los 3 o 4 años o por ahí llegó él. Y ahí nos conocimos y allí se quedó.
La soledad no es buena y la soledad suele traer un compañero malísimo que se llama alcoholismo y mata a la gente. Un día de estos que estás de bajón, estaba tirado encima de aquel colchón, entre aquellos cartones, pensando, ¿será posible que yo vaya a terminar los días que me faltan aquí tirado de esta manera por imbécil?
No es lo mismo que estar allí con un hornillo y algunas veces había que quitarlo, que entraba el agua, entraba...
Y un día la alcaldesa, yo no sé si alguien diría algo, Cecilia Pérez, me dijo, lo primero, preguntarte si quieres que haga algo por ti, por solucionarte la vida un poco. Cecilia se enteró del programa este y empezó a mover lo que tuvo que mover y hasta que lo aprobaron, hasta que me concedieron el piso y tal.
Dijeron que si querían yo entrar también en el proyecto y pues sí, dije que sí y entré también.
Y joder, yo flipé cuando vi el piso recién pintado, todo nuevo, tan guapo. Digo, es imposible que nos den un piso así.
No estar fuera pasando frío, la lluvia. Claro, le entra a uno alegría, que está uno en casa y que lo tiene, pues sí, bien.
Y mira tú por dónde te cambia la vida totalmente en nada, en 2 meses. Sí, fue un cambio brutal, brutal. Es totalmente distinto eso, estar durmiendo a la intemperie y entre cartones, a estar donde estoy.
Okay. I don't know if I am sharing the screen or are you sharing the screen?
I can share the screen for the presentation.
Okay. So, well, what we have just seen is the story of Aurelio and Pedro, and I would like to explain the 4 stakeholders that are the actors of this story. So we can go to the 5 slide. Next, please. Next. Yes, this one. So Aurelio Pedro is living today in social housing, thanks to 4 stakeholders, which are a social housing provider, a municipality. If you have seen that Aurelio mentioned the name of the mayor of the village, Cecilia Perez, so the municipality is another key stakeholder in this framework. An NGO, the NGO is supporting the autonomous life of Aurelio and Pedro, and of course the homeless people as a real tenants, So next, please. The role of each stakeholder is, so a social housing provider, public social housing provider makes dwellings available for homeless people. So there is a very strong political commitment. Social services from municipalities in collaboration with NGOs work together to identify and select which homeless people will become tenants. So they make the selection of different profiles, mainly people who is in the street for more than 10 years, people who has some problems about addictions and alcoholism and so on, and people with mental problems. Then the NGO is contracted by the municipality to assist homeless people once they have been given access to the dwelling. And I think this is a very important revolution in this issue, which is that the homeless people sign the rental contract with the social housing provider. So they have rights and duties as everyone who lives as tenants in other dwelling. And they have only to assume a commitment to work together with the NGO and to allow NGO that the NGO can support them in his normal life and visit them and so on. So next, please. Next. This model of collaboration between social housing provider, municipality, and NGO, we think that this is a revolution because social housing providers make dwellings available to homeless people. So, as I mentioned before, it's a political commitment is required, is previous to do everything. Municipalities they know their citizens, so they can choose the profiles that are going to the priority profiles to become a tenant in the framework of this model. The NGO is contacted by the municipality and provides social support to help them to tenant gain independence. Another important key of this model is that the rent is fixed depending on the income of the tenant and is always less than the 20% of their income. So the tenant for homeless people, a minimum income is also necessary to guarantee an independent life. And the Housing First program is included in the housing policy. It's not a temporary program. So because we think that one of the main problems is that if you put dwellings available for NGOs and the homeless people are not the tenants, when the programs end, what can we do with these people? So I think the revolution of this model of collaboration between social housing providers, municipalities, and NGO is that the dwellings are provided by social housing providers, which are public, so which are public administration, local or regional. And the homeless people are a real tenant, so they have rights and they have duties. The NGO is contracted to give support to homeless people in order to gain to get an autonomous life. These homeless people as a tenant can be in the dwelling, whereas they obey the law, they pay the rent and they respect the community. They can be in the dwelling for the rest of their lives. So we think that this is a revolution in the model of collaboration of social housing providers, municipalities, and NGOs. And where it's next piece, it's a way to make sustainable, smart the Housing First programs. So because the tenants, homeless people as a tenants, they can be in the dwelling where until they want. And with this model, the region was able to eradicate the homelessness, and currently we think that maybe there are 10 persons on the street, but we are going to give them in the short months a dwelling for them. So it has been a way to eradicate homelessness in a region of Spain. So we think that I would like to present this model because I think it's a little bit different than you can find in other regions or in other countries in Europe. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for sharing your experience and indeed for showing the human story behind the policies, and to showing the real impact this kind of effective solutions can have on people's life. If I have to remember two main points from your presentation, I would say that it was interesting to hear about the role of the municipality as an aggregator, basically, of all the different actors and the different services involved. And another aspect is, and maybe a keyword, is empowerment, because what you highlighted a lot in your presentation is that basically giving responsibility and opportunities to the people you house is something that is key to the success of the program. So thanks a lot, Maria. We move now from Spain to the very north of Europe. Is Kiel there? Yes, I see him. I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name, which is actually Kjell Larsson, whom I'm happy to introduce. So Kjell is the president of FEANSA for over 1 year now. And he's the developing director of the Swedish Association of City Missions. Kjell, the floor is yours to tell us about your experience.
Thank you very much, Alicia, and good morning. Well, is it still morning? I don't know. Feels like it's still morning for me, though. I just had a very interesting talk with the government here in Sweden now, and because I don't know if you know it, but it's one question that has arisen here in Sweden right now, and it has become very infected, and it's actually a question about our rental law and free rental market. So. And the issue is so infected that our government could fall because of that, and it will be announced on Monday morning, unfortunately, at the same time as the release of the platform. But I wasn't about that I was supposed to talk about. I wanted to say something about housing first in Sweden and what role public housing has to do with that. And we had very interesting listening to the other speakers also about the role of public housing in their speaking. Next, please. There is no housing first without a house. That's a quote I took from Juha Kakinen, who's the CEO of the Y Foundation in Finland, who has always said this in FEANSA: there is no housing first without a house. And I always use this quote in the constitutional meetings that I have with different actors when we starting a housing first project here in Sweden. Next, please. Let me first give you some background so you know that we have a very complicated situation in Sweden when you want to have a rental lease. We don't have a social housing sector in Sweden. It is an investigation going on, and it's going to be released in November this year, and it's going to be quite interesting to hear what solution and other things it's going to be recommended at the time. And we're looking forward to this and to that and to hear this, but we don't have any, as I said. And Sweden is one of the Nordic countries that where tenancy are open-ended with the Tenancy Act contained in our country's land code. And it's stating that the tenancy under ordinary law is an open-ended until further notice. So it's a quite strong situation tenant have in Sweden. This was already, like around the 70s, it become a fact. So in Sweden, all residential leases are subject to regulations aimed at establishing fair rents. Well, you may wonder what fair rents are. Well, we have also a very strong Swedish union of tenants also. It's one of the largest organizations here in Sweden that I think it's around 600,000 members in this organization, and it's quite strong. And they, as it said, they are now negotiating the rental levels with public housing and also with the private housing sector. So they have a very strong, you know, a tenant in Sweden has a very strong, they are secure, they are safe, and they have a very strong position, you can say, in this. And but this, when they have such a strong position, it also has become you know, like, it's been building up regulations and criterias, and it makes life more difficult also for people that are poor and social excluded to get a rental lease in public housing or in private housing, because they are, you know, the barriers to get a rental lease is quite high. And you have to have an income, and you have to show them that you really can afford paying, and before you get a rental lease. And that's why semi-rental leases and different kind of social contracts has become a very lucrative market also in Sweden. Next, please. Around the millennium shift, you know, the turn to a new century, the homelessness was quite new in Sweden. Homelessness in various forms had become a real social problem in Sweden at the time. So we didn't have, you know, like real homelessness in that matter before. We had not talked so much about homelessness and how it affects and how it affects, you know, like and how it was growing and increasingly for a diverse number of people, from, you know, individuals to families in vulnerable financial situations to people with more complex support needs. Also, we had a quite large, you know, like staircase model with shelter system at the time, and those kind of organizations were quite skeptical also to housing first, and voices like that, it won't work, you are so naive and think that people with, you know, like been in homelessness can move into an apartment like it is in housing first, etc. So it was, you know, quite, you know, like two sides of the medal here. But during a meeting in 2003, an offer came from a person who had some guts, who had some enough innovative thinking, and who was the CEO of one of the public house corporation that is called Poseidon. Poseidon is a part of Gothenburg Public Housing corporate group that called Framtiden. I don't know if that's important, but in a meeting where City Mission Social Services and Poseidon had about problems in a certain area in Gothenburg. Gothenburg consisted of 10 areas at the time, and it had something around 65 to 70,000 people in every area. And it was, you know, like engineering divided into these 10 areas. But especially one area, there were problems. There were problems of different kinds. There were, you know, like we saw that there were, problems. Everybody know what I'm talking about. And I worked for the city at the time, and I was responsible for the Gothenburg homeless plan. So I got involved in that project where this person, he offered, you know, like 60 apartments. Here we are. Is this useful for you to work with? So we started a project, and we have heard the earlier speakers also talked about how to start a project with housing first and everyone that needs to get involved in the project. And we started with this, the rental leases were semi-contracts, and after 2 years, if everything had worked out well with, you know, like no disturbances of serious kinds and or neglection to pay rents and so on, the tenants would get their own, you know, like rental contract. And at the time when everyone said that this would not work, I, for instance, who had been a part of building up the staircase model also in Gothenburg, was a bit skeptical at the time. You know, this was 2003, and fortunately for us, there was an innovative guy in Poseidon who really took the lead and said that here we are, work with this, and we can work together and see what it can do. So in 2008, I got an offer to work for City Mission, and the first thing I did was to take care of this project and made it a permanent unit. And we had very, very good cooperation also with public housing in Gothenburg in doing this. And because of that, Poseidon is a part of this Gothenburg Public Housing Corporate Group. They could also convince other private landlords and to join this, you know, like join this venture also. And this was the start. Well, the starting point was actually somewhere around 2004 or 5 or something, but then we could do it as a permanent way. And by 2020, we had, you know, like almost the same partnerships in 8 of 10 of these different areas in Gothenburg, and it really became the largest housing first in Sweden. And that says something also about Sweden, because we talk a lot about housing first in Sweden. We don't have such scaling up housing first that we want to scale up, but hopefully we're gonna scale up housing first in a way, in a matter that we want to, you know, like achieve as they have achieved in other countries also. But for us, since we don't have a social housing sector, it's so important that we can cooperate with the public housing that we have here in Sweden. And we have some different joint ventures also with the Sveriges Allmännytta, the organization that collects all the public housing in Sweden. So we are constantly taking a couple of steps forward all the time. So hopefully the next time we have a webinar in the Housing Solution platform in the future, we can say that, oh, now we have taken a giant step to really get some, you know, like scaling up housing first in Sweden with the help of public housing, because without a house, there is no housing first. So it doesn't matter how good the models are or everything, but you need housing for that. Next, please. So no guts, no glory. It's was an like a learning from this experiment that started in the Gothenburg. You have to have guts. You have to have someone that stand up and say that, come on, let's do this. We do this in an innovative way, and we are trying. We have the well, you have to have people that like dare to stand up and say that we think that this will work because this is driven by the tenants themselves, and we trust that they can cope with this and can manage to do this. So you need to have it, and I'm not going to go into furthermore because the other speakers have talked about this. So how the projects are working and what you need to do in this matter. So I just want to say that you need guts to really to make this project work, and you need cooperation with all the stakeholders. So thank you very much for me, and if there's any question, I don't know how we had talked about questions, but
thanks a lot, Kjell. Questions will be taken actually at the end.
Okay.
We will first listen to all the panelists, and then we will head for some discussion. But thanks a lot in the meantime for your presentation, and I think we can basically all go back home with some good quotes from what you presented. First and foremost, the fact that there is no housing first without a house or without home available. And this, of course, becomes increasingly important and potentially an issue at the time when social housing systems and public housing systems are under pressure in many European countries, including Sweden, it's interesting because I think everybody looks up at the Nordic welfare system. And as you mentioned, Sweden is a very good example in terms of protection of tenants. But I was reading one of your reports on poverty from the Association of City Nations, and you phrased it in a way like there will always be people falling through the cracks. So I think we shouldn't forget that even in very good systems, there is still a need to tackle some critical situations. So I will move straight to the next speaker, the last one of this first session, and I will introduce you Bjorn Mallens. Bjorn, are you there? Can you connect? So Bjorn is a member of the Board of Housing Europe, but he's almost also, and most important, the director of VVH. VVH is the Association of Flemish Social Housing Companies that brings together 88 social housing providers in the Flemish region of Belgium, managing about 150,000 homes in Flanders. So Bjorn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alice. So let's try first to share the screen. Okay, here we go. Thanks a lot for the invitation. I will look at it from a more broad perspective from a social housing system in the Flemish region. You have to know that Flanders, in ways of housing policy, has total policy making opportunities. So it's a complete regional policy in Belgium. So Flanders is in a way steering the entire housing policy in its own region. I start with the global goals, sustainable development goals from the European from United Nations. Why? Because we used 4 of them as more or less the backbone of the manifesto we wrote in 2019 for the Flemish elections. We choose the same 4 as Housing Europe has done. That are the main goals in ways of social housing and the impact that social housing can have on society in general. You see some figures there. I won't go too much in detail in them. You will have the presentation afterwards. Just to give you an idea about our sector in Flanders, I think that the main figure you should look at is that we have 160,000 dwellings in stock, which is 6% of the social housing market, which is in a way, if you compare it with the neighboring countries, not so much, especially if you compare it with, for instance, France or the Netherlands. We also have 12,000 social rental agencies stock. Social rental agencies are quite active in Flanders, especially in ways of priority allocation. And they do a lot of allocation to people who fall in the ethos typology of fianza, so who are in a way homeless or in danger to become homeless in a very recent future. It's important to know that in the near future we will have to merge the social housing companies who own their stock and the social rental agencies in new housing associations. So that will be in one way quite difficult process. In the other way, it's quite interesting, and it will give some opportunities to deepen the way we approach housing, social housing, priority housing in Flanders. But the only other figure I want to highlight, and that's what just below it, is that we have at this moment a waiting list of 175,000 households, total of about 500,000 people who are waiting for social housing. So we can replace our entire stock, social housing companies and social rental agencies, with the people on the waiting list. When we look at the perspective of Housing First, I think two of the Sustainable Development Goals that we highlighted are important here. Of course, no poverty. We approach social housing from the perspective that everybody who is in need of housing, who has a low income and is not able to pay the housing cost on their own, should be provided by a solution from the government. That's the main idea. Of course, and then we come to the second part, to give you an idea in ways of effectiveness. We are one of the most effective social housing systems in the OECD countries. So we really target the lowest income, the right target group. We have very good figures about that, but still the waiting list is as big as the stock. When we look especially at the homeless, the Housing First story, of course also, well, it's in Dutch, but health and well-being, welfare are important issues also to combine when we look at the effects, as a study recently showed, the effects, the non-shelter effects of housing, social housing, in ways of, for instance, education, but also in ways of health. So, and I agree totally with the last speaker that mainly we need housing to provide housing solutions. And the best way to do that is to provide social housing. And as I said, we need double the amount of social housing that we have at this moment in Flanders. It's no coincidence that the poverty level in Flanders is also 14%. So if we double our stock, we're at 12%, and the poverty level is 14%. So that's no coincidence where that figure comes from. Now, when we look at Housing First in Flanders, Belgium, it's interesting that we have done a study not so long ago. It's from a couple of years ago, but I think the figures are still very, very interesting and very relevant. And what you see there is the access to the housing market from different types of solutions for homelessness. So you have the traditional support system, shelter system, welfare organizations guiding people to housing. So it's in gray. And then we have the Housing First Belgium solution, and the study that has been set up in the past. And what you see there is that mainly from the traditional support system, 1 out of 2 goes to the private market. private housing market, private housing rental market, mainly because we have a waiting list based on chronology. So only 1 out of 4, more or less, goes to the social rental market. When we look at how we tackled housing first, or how we set up housing first in this experiment, or in this study, it's not really an experiment, it's a study, and we see that it mainly goes through the social or public housing market, and that the access to the traditional private rental market is much smaller. You also see the figure of the social rental agency in this scheme, and what you see there, and that's quite interesting. It's not the figures are absolute figures, so it's not based on the amount of stock. It's really the total amount of actual allocations. So what we see there is that from the traditional support system, a lot of those people get access to housing through social rental agencies. That's not strange, because the allocation model of the social rental agencies is based on priority. It's mainly based on the ethos typology of fianza. So it's not based on chronology like in social housing. It's based on priority, need, and there you see that, of course, a lot of the homeless solutions in housing go to the social rental agencies. But what's important there is that you see that in Housing First Belgium, social housing stock owned by the social housing companies is the most important provider of housing solutions. The experiment also showed, or the study also showed, that the success rate of Housing First to tackle homelessness is very high in Belgium, Flanders. So we see that after 2 years using Housing First as a solution for homelessness, still 90% of the people have adequate and stable housing. Very often, of course, in the same social house they got access to from the beginning. If you look at the success rates from the more traditional approach, you see that it takes 2 years to get only 1 out of 2 homeless people in an actual adequate housing solution. And then after another 2 years, 86% of those people are still in that solution. So the success rate, even if you find a solution, is lower from the traditional model, but only 1 out of 2 get even access to a housing solution, an adequate housing solution. So we see that Housing First, in a way, is quite important and is a quite adequate solution for homeless people. And why is social housing so important in this field? Well, there are a couple of reasons. First of all, we can work through the social rental agencies, and we can use that in a way of priority allocation. Also in the social housing sector, there's also a very small amount, we should increase that, but it's there, also priority allocation for homeless people. But what we need there, and I think that's very important to highlight, what we need there is very adequate and enough support from welfare, health organizations, and other possible actors in the field. Because what we have now in some places in Flanders, and that's really the world turned out, we have space for priority allocations for homeless people, but the welfare assistance is not available. So there's a waiting list for assistance to get priority access to social housing. And we should really tackle that, because it's not a direct combination, of course, between welfare, healthcare assistance, and social housing in ways of Housing First. So it's not an obligation to get help to get in Housing First. But of course, everyone knows that it should be available. And there we see that there's a lack of capacity, mainly in the welfare sector. So what's one of the main reasons that I think social housing can help in two ways in tackling homelessness. First of all, you see here the cost of housing is increasing everywhere in Europe, and the economic growth is not increasing that much. So that leads to a problem in affordability. And that has an impact on homelessness in two ways. People get kicked out of their house, evicted. So there's a risk of becoming homeless. But of course, also the other way around. Homeless people getting in the system, or getting in an adequate housing, and have rents that are way too high. Well, that's what we see here. That's not a good solution. And that's why Housing First is mainly targeted in social housing, because we have more or less half of the market rents. And I think that's the last point I want to stress, is that it's very important that we not only find solutions for people who are homeless now, but it's even more important that we work on preventing eviction. And that's also something, and that we have seen in COVID-19, is that social housing companies do that at a much more engaged level. And the engagement is still increasing. Here you see figures from the amount of procedures and actual evictions in the Netherlands, and you see that they actually managed to decrease them, and they took up the engagement to work very hard in preventing evictions, and you see that it really worked. The last slide, we did the same in Flanders, beginning about 2010. And you see that the eviction level, procedure level and eviction level, has been at a very steady course for a very long time. You even see a drop in 2020 due to the moratorium on evictions due to COVID-19. You see that we actually lowered the eviction rate at the same moment with an increasing stock of social housing. Just to give you some ideas, some comparison with the private rental market, we have an eviction rate of 0.3% of our families. It's 1% in the private rental market. So it's 3 times as much, probably even higher, because it's an estimation in the private rental market based on our ratio. But we see at least that it's a much bigger problem, and it's quite normal for 2 reasons. We spend a lot of time preventing people not paying rent, guiding people with debts to have a payment plan, social assistance, and things like that, working together with other welfare organizations. So we really invest and engage a lot to prevent that, which is of course something you can't really expect from private landlords. At the same moment, our rent is half the market rent. So the possibility that people won't pay their rent or can't pay their rent or will build up a big debt is very, very much lower. So that are the 2 strengths, I think, in social housing in ways of doing this. Just one last remark is about the social rental market. So the social rental agencies, as I said, we will have to merge soon. But what you see there, and that's a figure we really have to work on, is that I have a quite high eviction rate. It's even higher than on the private rental market. And the main reason there, well, there are 2 reasons. First of all, you have the priority allocation, as I said. So the profiles are from the target group of social housing profiles are the profiles with the lowest income, and very often the multi-dimensional problems in welfare, health, and things like that, addiction. And at the same moment, they pay the market price. So there you see that the effect of actually managing your own stock and being able to reduce the price in combination with a lot of engagement in prevention and working together with other partners, that it's really a good solution to use Housing First as an opportunity, as a possibility, and as probably the best way of tackling homelessness. And we have put this very very clear in our manifesto in 2019 that we, as a social housing sector in Flanders, believe in housing first. That of course the other partners have to provide enough capacity to provide the assistance, and the Flemish government has also took that over and put it in their policy for this legislation. So let's hope that we can actually take some steps forward in this field. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Bjorn, for your presentation and for also bringing up an interesting point. It's about looking at the future and indeed how to prevent potential wave of eviction or increase in homelessness related to this. I think we're almost running out of time, but I would like maybe to ask one question to panelists. If you can just give me very quickly some thoughts on how you think that the COVID-19 pandemic is changing your approach in dealing with homelessness. Anybody who might want to reply to this? Shell, please. I see you raised your hand, so please go ahead.
Yes, I can't start the video. It looks like the host is stopping me, but it doesn't matter. I can just say that I think it has the COVID has made it quite clear that that the need of a permanent housing-led solutions are so important in these times, because when they say that you have to stay at home in this crisis, you have to stay at home, but how can you stay at home if you don't have a home? So it's become very clear during the pandemic that we have to, really urgently start to become more clear about housing-led strategies in all member state countries, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Shell. And I see Bjorn would like to add a few words.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think what we have seen is that our ways of trying to maximize the limited budget on social housing that we have has led to an optimization of space, a lot of small apartments with a lot of open space. But people didn't have their own garden or their own open space in an apartment or things like that. And at a certain moment, they couldn't move in the open space that we provided. So I think we will start rethinking in a way how we develop neighborhoods and provide open space in apartments, but also with little gardens and things like that for all our tenants. Because we thought the solution was, let's build very dense buildings and then provide parks around it. But at a certain moment, it was forbidden to walk in parks with more than 2 people or to sit on benches. And all the playgrounds were closed in Flanders at a certain moment. So there were a lot of people who also lost their job, and they were all staying home with a lot of little children, and they couldn't go out. So we invested a lot, or our social services invested a lot to try to reach those people, but of course they couldn't have personal contact. So it was really a very complicated way to address these problems. We saw an increase of partner violence, an increase of people doing crazy things, and there was a lot of pressure, especially in a social housing neighborhood. So I think we should, in a way, use this opportunity to rethink how we develop neighborhoods with this experience that we, of course, could have never predicted a couple of years ago.
Thank Thank you very much, Bjorn. And I see Maria has also raised her hand. I'm afraid it will have to be the last comment that we take. And Maria, please keep it short, but then we will also have time for discussion after the second session with the Commission as well. So please, Maria, if you have 1 minute.
Yeah, 1 minute, only a few words. I think that COVID-19 had two important impacts. The first one was that everybody could see that you had to stay at home, but many people hadn't any home where they could stay. They were sleeping on the streets. So the COVID-19 put the problem in front of the society. And the second one was the second one was that I think that COVID-19 speed up some political decisions concerning homelessness. I think that for politicians, they suddenly they were awareness that they had to develop political solutions concerning homelessness. So I think that COVID-19 was, in fact, only in this area a good impact for awareness of the problem.
Thank you very much, Maria, for finishing on this positive, or at least a note of hope in terms of the changing political environment. We are now going to take a very short break. I promised a break on the program, but then we're running out of time. So I would propose we just stretch our legs, get a glass of water, and we join again the meeting at 11:35. So I will now close my screen momentarily.
Shall we start, Alice?
Indeed. So we're starting again in a minute. If I could ask panelists to be there. Right. So we're happy to have as the next speaker and kicking off the second part of our webinar today, Katerina Ivankovic-Gnieziewicz. She's the Director for Social Affairs in the European Commission Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. So please, Katerina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Alice, do you hear me? Do you see me?
We hear you and see you perfectly.
Good, 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 good. I had this morning some difficulties, but not with Zoom, with a platform the TSF committee is using, but it's fine now. I was listening a bit, eardropping to your previous panel. It's very interesting, the discussion, and I believe it was really also a good introduction to this part of your session. And I'm here actually to first of all inform you about what the Commission is doing in the area of housing and housing exclusion, and most important, what are we going to do on Monday, which is a big day, I believe, for all of us dealing with homeless people experiencing homelessness, because we are launching in Lisbon the European platform on combating the homelessness. And European platform for combating the homelessness is I believe, a result of the long process and many years of quality, I would say, advocacy and lobbying for putting the topic highly on the agenda. But this is also the process of the Commission understanding that in order to eradicate poverty and in order to combat it, we need to address those that are most vulnerable among us. And for sure, people who are homeless are the most vulnerable groups on so many levels and layers. Also, what has maybe pushed us even a bit further and made us rethink the whole aspects of the social policy is indeed the COVID-19 pandemic. And but in the area of homelessness, it only further highlighted the urgency that we need to take effective action now, and that there is no space for no room for waiting and acting later, but indeed we need to do something in all EU at our various respective different levels. You know very well that this is not new. This is also part of the European Pillar of Social Rights. The Principle 19 is specifically devoted to the housing assistance and to the homeless as a key social inclusion element. And besides Pillar Principle 19, we are very much aware who is in charge and who should be in charge. We know that the European Commission has a role to play in putting together the stakeholders, in raising the awareness, in creating the overall positive environment for member states to act. But it is also the national competence, and member states, especially at the local and regional level, have extremely important role to play. And I believe this is also very much visible and will be visible in Lisbon on Monday. First, because we are going to launch the platform, but the member states, civil society, and EU institutions, European Parliament, European Commission, and two consultative committees, the Committee of Regions and Economic and Social Committee, are going to sign the Lisbon Declaration on combating homelessness. And in this declaration, we politically commit to aim at ending homelessness by 2030. And this is why it is important. We are establishing common understanding. We are establishing the common commitment. And we want to see the concrete progress in combating the homelessness. Maybe just briefly to tell you what the objectives and what are we going to do in the platform. So maybe just to start with mentioning that the platform is a exchange and as a place where member states, civil society and EU institutions will come together and discuss, is going to allow for the exchange of best practices and for the mutual learning. Not only at the national level, but also very important for us, cities. And that's why Committee of Regions is there. And that's why also the other civil society organizations working with cities are there. Then we want to put particular attention to effective interventions to prevent and solve homelessness, including through so-called housing-led solutions or housing-led approach. The housing-led approach is the initiative that better really or the best reflects the integrated approach of the structural funds as well, because it does not only relate to the social housing component, but also looks at the services and brings those two elements together. Secondly, the platform is going to work on the use of existing national and EU financial resources. There, when we speak about resources, we always maybe have at first the European Social Fund Plus or the European Regional Development Fund, but we also want to dig in the other windows. We want to see what InvestEU can offer. Can InvestEU leverage public and private investments in social housing and provide additional push, let's say, to the cities or local communities in order to find the best way how to deal with eradicating homelessness. We also want to see how it will be tackled in the renovation wave. We want to see the final outcome of the recovery and resilience programs prepared under the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And actually, we want to see that the whole multi-annual financial framework is working in the same direction. And in order to achieve that, we are very much aware that further work will be needed in providing additional accompanying services. And the dissemination of the information, which is always crucial, is also crucial for us within the platform. And maybe last but not least, and actually the first topic that we will be discussing in the platform is the understanding of what homelessness is, and also improving the data collection and evidence-based policies and evidence collection to really have our decisions accordingly and in line with the sound management of the evidence-based policy approach. And what we also in the Commission like to say, we see the homelessness platform as a place where we will also discuss other Commission and other EU level initiatives that are relevant for the homeless population, namely just the child guarantee adopted on last Monday. We are very much looking forward. This morning I spoke at the ESF Technical Committee and explaining how the European child guarantee should be implemented and what is the relation between the recommendation and the potential use of the funds. And of course, I highlighted one of the groups that we mentioned, and specifically in the child guarantee, which are homeless children, and how their fast transition from temporary accommodation should be secured. And this is what we aim in the child guarantee. And I'm looking forward to see how the member states are going to implement it within their national action plans. And for those of you whose job is advocacy and lobbying, please do your job as fast as possible, because operational programs are almost done, and the national action plans for the child guarantee will be done in 9 months. It doesn't leave us much time for act. Then just to mention the strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities, I already spoke, I believe, to all of you about this strategy and how the focus on homeless persons with disabilities should be. Also the affordable housing initiative in the context of the 100 of the renovation wave, and let's see how the piloting of the lighthouse renovations districts will be done, and how it will affect the homeless population. But also, for example, when we speak about prevention, we are paying close attention to energy poverty recommendation, which lays out the best options for structural remedies to guarantee the domestic supply of those most in need. So big day, to put the long story in short, big day for all of us dealing with homelessness on Monday. Besides signing ceremony and beside the high-level tables with ministers, I'm very happy that we practically have almost all the member states on board. We are still counting on those 1 or 2 who are still reflecting to receive their feedback, and Portuguese colleagues are very much in contact with them. We are expecting around 12 ministers in Lisbon, and the remaining ministers to be around the screens as they will take a part virtually. And on Monday, we will also award the best projects awarded using ESF for addressing the homelessness. So happy to reply on any question you have. Thank you all for being really good partners in the process. Thank all of you who will be signing the declaration for your determination to work on the cause. There will be plenty of opportunities to discuss further and to reflect further on the important topics on the homelessness. But I believe indeed that this is really the start of really good and fruitful cooperation of all the different stakeholders. And the format that the platform is taking, which is outside of the usual working groups or high-level groups, I believe also gives us the possibility to create something new for indeed the better future, to be here, not tomorrow, but already today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ivankovic-Knežević, for this very interesting explanation and for clarifying what we can expect from the forthcoming European platform on combating homelessness. We're, I think, all very excited about this new opportunity, and from Housing Europe, we're very happy that we will be invited to be one of the signatories of the declaration. Maybe just you said that you managed to listen to some of the presentation for the morning, but we wanted to highlight a few points that emerged from the first panel, which is that so the central role that social housing can play in preventing and tackling homelessness, but together and in cooperation with other services providers, welfare services, social services, healthcare, and the need for stability and continuous cooperation, and also the dedicated necessary funding. So we're also looking forward for more possibility to integrate EU sources of funding in putting together good and integrated projects at the local level. I think keeping all this in mind, and as a reaction to your presentation, I would ask panelists to comment very briefly on what they see as the main potential added value from the EU in helping them with their work at local level. So who wants to take the floor first? Maybe we can start by Sarah, because she didn't have a chance to speak at the end of the last session. Please, Sarah, go ahead.
Okay. As I said, I think that EU can bring, of course, some funds, because we know now that we can use cohesion funds to promote housing first, to help the change also at the local and national level. And I think that EU can also help member states to fix some goals, some objectives to eradicate homelessness at EU level, even if it's by step. We think that we have to fix some goals, and at the end of the day to have an evaluation of the policies and to discuss, not to point the difficulties as difficulties, but to work together again to go forward the difficulties. And I think we will have this, I hope we will have this partnership and the opportunity to work all together with the platform.
Somebody else who wants to react?
Well, I can't be quiet, you know. I have to say something always. Thank you very much, Katarina, for your presentation. Also, it was interesting to hear. Always interesting to hear this when we talked about this day, and it's finally coming up on Monday. We've been talking about this for so many months now, so it's going to be very interesting to release that platform now. And of course, as Sarah said, it's about the funding, also the project funding, and we are going to speak about that also on Monday when we have this homeless awards that we are doing together with the Commission. The Fianza and the Commission are handing out these awards also, and we have to, you know, constantly speak about how this project funding are important in EU, national, regional, and local level. So that's the only thing I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shell. And I see Maria has raised her hand as well. Please, Maria.
Yes, thank you, Alice. I think that when you have a political commitment in order to solve some social problems, financing always appears. Anyway, so for us, the first question is, of course, financing is necessary, but first it's necessary a political commitment combating homelessness situation. Having said this, for instance, we are working in Spain in a kind of platform together with other NGOs and other regional governments, local authorities, and we are exploring the housing first programs that we can develop in the framework of the cohesion funds 2021-2027. And it is very interesting because some of local authorities and some members of this platform are sharing with us some past experience, and we have to learn from the past experience and see how can we introduce new lines combating homelessness in ERDF and ESF, which I think that they have some specific objectives that include homeless people and social housing and housing. So I think this is very important to work together with other stakeholders, with other organizations, in order to not only in the situation of the Next Generation funds and whatever, but in the framework of the Cohesion Fund until 2027.
Thank you very much, Maria, for this reflection on a positive example of partnership and constructively thinking of how to make the best use of EU funding opportunities. I think we're running very short of time, so I would maybe just give Ms. Ivankovic-Nesevic a chance to indeed react to these questions and comments.
Yes, thank you very much, Alice. Just a few words, and Maria said it all when she said, when there is a political will, there is a way, and that's the key. That's the same in every policy, and I'm just really happy, and thank you, Shell, for supporting words. I'm also looking forward on Monday to see not only to see you in person, but also to reflect and see really the motion between the ministers and the member states and the civil society and everybody else who will be in Lisbon. And we will be there meeting also the persons experiencing homelessness. And we want this whole motion to be really to start and to be pushed as much as possible. Sarah, I'm absolutely aware that the goals are very important. Targets are always important, and what we are directly contributing is to the target on reducing the poverty. But we are very much aware that within the platform we have a very fair chance to put it on the agenda and to put it on the table much more than we ever had before. Because we will have those who will be strongly advocating for the targets, for the new indicators, and for the new benchmarks. We will have those who have to implement it in their member states and to hear their voice and their understanding. And then also we will have us, the institutions, who are here in a way to put it all together and make it reality. So very, very happy that this process is starting. When we started, just to tell you a curiosity, when we started reflecting on the platform and the declaration, it was many times highlighted, by the highest political leaders that maybe we will just have a few member states who would like to really work on the homelessness. I have to say, and I'm extremely happy that the approach that we took was, no, we need everyone on board. Because you can't fight homelessness in some member states and let the others just be. You have really to put it on the agenda of all, and looking forward for the outcome, and looking forward for really those who will be either virtually or in person signing the declaration on Monday is the only thing that gives us a bit of really optimism that something is going to be done in that area. Plus, we do not plan to let it hang in the air. We plan to push for the meetings of the platform, of the full platform, for the discussion, for understanding what it is, for working with Eurostat and all the other important stakeholders, not to mention JRC and OECD, on providing the evidence and the data. And this is where we see that we might succeed, and we want to succeed. And but the overall target by 2030, working towards ending, I still believe that this is a good and fair commitment that all of us are going to take on board on Monday.
Thank you very much for ending on this positive note. I will now leave the floor for a very short wrap-up and conclusion. So please, I would ask Sorka Edwards, the Secretary General of Housing Europe, to take the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Alice, and to all of the panelists. I'm very happy to inform indeed that the President of Housing Europe will be attending on Monday at this event as one of the signatories. He will be attending online. Just to wrap up quickly, I think one of the key points that has come through has obviously been partnership, and this event is also a result of a partnership between Abbé Pierre, Housing Europe and FIANSA. So I think it's important to thank all of the organizers from the 3 organizations for that effort over the last months. And some words to conclude on the key messages that have come out. I think really at the core has been, we saw in this video coming through from our Spanish members and Spanish social housing providers, and I think it just is a very important reminder to what we are talking about here, and that is about dignity of individuals, dignities of human beings. And I think this is something that is often forgotten when we are constantly looking at data and PowerPoints. I think the point made by Shell on guts is also extremely important. We've come to a really crucial point when it comes to housing policy. I would say a turning point, a watershed moment because of the pandemic. We all knew that the housing crisis was brewing, but the pandemic has put a really even stronger light on the extreme housing inequalities in our society, including homelessness. And it's going to take guts at all levels. So the guts of those ministers who will be there on Monday, but particularly at local level to push for new approaches and ambitious approaches that put dignity at the center. I think the other key point is the mutual learning. Katarina, you said that the platform will be very much focused on this mutual learning. We've seen today already with the 3 presentations coming in from France, Sweden, Spain, and Flanders, how important that constant exchange of experiences of what works on the ground and the data, so the numbers, to look at how successful the approaches are. For instance, after Housing First, how long people are actually staying in those homes. This is key, a constant tracking. But also, I think the point that Bjorn made was very crucial. It's not just about quantitative data, it will also be about qualitative data, hearing back from people living in those neighborhoods on how it is going and being ready to adapt the approach when there is a negative feedback or when there is a positive feedback. So I think it's not only about numbers, it's about also tuning in to how those projects are really working locally. And the last point, and I think this came through from Shell, this came through from Sarah, from Bjorn, and from Maria, is the big picture, and that is how these Housing First solutions have to be embedded in a smart, sustainable, integrated housing policy. That was the nice words that Maria finished up with, and what is important to stress, of course, in the big picture is the overall lack of supply, which was highlighted by Shell when he talked about the issues around how rare public contracts are for access to housing in Sweden, how Bjorn emphasized that 175,000 households are on the waiting list in Flanders, accounting for 500,000 people. So I think that is also a key point, this big picture, looking at the need for a critical mass of supply of social housing so that this can be really turned around and so that the broader demands of society can be met. And I would like to finish up there, and I'm looking forward to working together with the Commission and the stakeholders on the platform and continuing this extremely important exchange. And thank you very much, Alice, for excellent organization and for all of the team working behind the scenes.
Thank you, Sorka, for these final words. I think we are going to close our meeting today. Let me first just thank once again all the panelists and also everybody who participated actively to the webinar. The webinar has been recorded and we will write up a report on what was discussed this morning. So please follow the follow-up on Housing Europe and the Housing Solutions platform website. Thank you very much for participating. Bye.